In the sunlit streets of Realengo, Rio de Janeiro, bustling life unfolded with its usual rhythm. Children laughed, parents hurried to work, and the city prepared for another day under the tropical sky. Yet for Wellington Menezes de Oliveira, April 7, 2011, was not just another day. It was the day he chose to leave his mark, a mark of blood, horror, and loss that would shatter countless lives and reverberate through Brazil's collective consciousness. Wellington's life began on July 13, 1987, under circumstances that were anything but stable. Abandoned by his biological parents while still an infant, he was adopted by an evangelical couple, Delcy and Divina Menezes. Although they provided for his basic needs and ensured he attended school, Wellington's life was marked by an overwhelming sense of alienation. Classmates described him as an outsider, a boy who rarely spoke and struggled to form connections. His introversion made him a target for bullying taunts about his appearance, and peculiar mannerisms followed him throughout his childhood. Each insult, each cruel prank, planted seeds of resentment that would later bloom into something far darker. As Wellington grew older, his difficulties deepened. He began to isolate himself, retreating into a world of solitude. His adoptive parents, while loving, were strict and deeply religious, often imposing rigid expectations on him. The disconnect between their faith-driven worldview and Wellington's internal turmoil only widened the gap between them. Tragedy struck in 2010 when Divina, his adoptive mother and primary source of stability, passed away. Her death marked the beginning of Wellington's spiral into despair. Bereft of emotional support, he withdrew even further, finding solace in conspiracy theories and extremist ideologies that he encountered online. By the time Wellington reached his early 20s, the psychological scars of his childhood had festered into paranoia and delusion. His mind became a labyrinth of dark thoughts, fueled by a growing obsession with purity, vengeance, and martyrdom. He fixated on past school shootings, particularly the Columbine massacre, and saw in them a twisted form of inspiration. Wellington's writings during this period reveal the depth of his disturbed thinking. In his manifesto, he railed against society, decrying what he saw as its immorality and corruption. His vitriol was particularly directed at women and children, whom he deemed unworthy of redemption. He envisioned himself as an agent of divine retribution, chosen to cleanse the world through violence. In preparation for his plan, Wellington began acquiring the tools of his trade. He purchased 2 revolvers, a .38 caliber and a .32 caliber, along with an extensive supply of ammunition. Each bullet was a symbol of his growing resolve, his readiness to unleash the hatred he had nurtured for so long. The morning of April 7th began like any other at Tasso da Silveira Municipal School, a public institution in Realengo that served children aged 12 to 15. Teachers prepared their lessons, students filled the classrooms, and the school buzzed with the typical energy of young life. Shortly after 8 a.m., Wellington arrived at the school. Dressed in ordinary clothing and carrying a backpack heavy with ammunition, he approached the entrance. To gain access, he told security guards that he was a former student and wished to deliver a lecture to the children. His calm demeanor and seemingly innocuous request aroused no suspicion, and he was allowed inside. Once inside the school, Wellington made his way to the 2nd floor. There, in the heart of the school, he began his assault. Drawing his revolvers, he opened fire on a classroom full of unsuspecting students. The first shots echoed through the hallways, sending students and teachers into a panic. Some fled immediately, while others froze in shock. Wellington, however, was methodical. He moved from room to room, targeting his victims with chilling precision. Witnesses later recounted the terrifying scene: students screaming, teachers trying to shield their pupils, and the sound of gunfire reverberating through the building. Wellington's focus on female students, in particular, was evident. His misogynistic rage, fueled by years of perceived rejection, manifested in the targeting of young girls. In the span of just a few minutes, Wellington murdered 12 children and injured 13 others. His victims were as young as 12, their lives cut short in an act of incomprehensible cruelty. As the massacre unfolded, frantic calls from survivors and witnesses alerted the authorities. Police and first responders rushed to the scene, their sirens wailing through the streets of Realengo. Among them was Sergeant Marcio Alves, who would play a pivotal role in ending the nightmare. Entering the school, Alves encountered a scene of chaos: blood-streaked hallways, shattered windows, and children huddled in terror. He made his way to the second floor, where he confronted Wellington. Cornered and realizing that his plan was unraveling, Wellington turned one of his revolvers on himself. With a single gunshot, he ended his life, leaving behind a trail of devastation and unanswered questions. The Realengo massacre sent shockwaves through Brazil. Families were left to grapple with unimaginable loss, their lives forever altered by the events of that morning. Vigils and memorials sprang up across the nation, as communities mourned the children whose futures had been stolen. Investigators delved into Wellington's background, seeking to understand the motivations behind his actions. His manifesto and online activity painted a grim picture of a man consumed by hatred, paranoia, and delusion. The chilling detail of his preparations and the methodical nature of his attack highlighted the premeditated nature of the crime. The Brazilian government responded with a renewed focus on school security. Metal detectors were installed in public schools, and police presence was increased to prevent similar tragedies. Yet, for the families of the victims, no policy change could fill the void left by their loss. The Realengo massacre remains one of the darkest chapters in Brazil's history. Wellington Menezes de Oliveira's name has become synonymous with an act of unimaginable cruelty, a reminder of the devastating consequences of untreated mental illness and unchecked access to firearms. For the survivors and the families of the victims, the pain endures. Every anniversary of the massacre brings a fresh wave of grief, a reminder of the lives cut short by one man's descent into madness. Yet, amidst the sorrow, there is also resilience. The community of Realengo has come together to honor the memory of those lost, refusing to let their legacy be defined solely by tragedy. Wellington Menezes de Oliveira's story is one of despair and destruction, a cautionary tale about the dangers of isolation, radicalization, and unchecked violence. His actions left a nation mourning and a community shattered, but they also sparked important conversations about how to prevent such tragedies in the future. In remembering the events of April 7, 2011, we are reminded of the fragility of life and the importance of vigilance in protecting it. The scars left by the Realengo massacre will never fully heal, but they serve as a solemn testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of darkness. In the weeks following the massacre, Brazil was engulfed in a national reckoning. News outlets dissected Wellington Menezes de Oliveira's life, seeking to unearth every detail that might explain how a seemingly ordinary man could commit such heinous acts. Psychologists, sociologists, and criminologists weighed in, offering theories about his psyche. The common thread in their analyses was the undeniable role of his isolation and mental health struggles. Experts pointed to his fixation on purity and morality, evident in his writings, as signs of delusional thinking. Wellington's manifesto revealed not only a disdain for society but also a desire for revenge against those he believed had wronged him. He framed his actions as a form of divine justice, elevating himself to the role of an avenging angel. For many Brazilians, these explanations were inadequate. How could someone with clear signs of mental distress slip through the cracks of a society that prides itself on familial and community bonds? Why had no one intervened when he began stockpiling weapons and exhibiting erratic behavior? The massacre also reignited debates about gun control. Although Brazil has stringent gun laws, the ease with which Wellington acquired his firearms and ammunition highlighted gaps in enforcement. Activists called for stricter measures, while opponents argued that the focus should be on addressing the root causes of violence, such as mental health and social inequality. Amid the chaos of that fateful morning, there were moments of extraordinary bravery and resilience. Survivors recounted how teachers risked their lives to protect their students, barricading doors and urging children to escape through windows. One teacher, who shielded a group of students with her own body, suffered injuries but survived, earning widespread praise for her heroism. Students who managed to escape described the horror of seeing their friends and classmates gunned down before their eyes. For many, the trauma would linger long after the physical wounds had healed. Nightmares, anxiety, and survivors' guilt became a daily reality for those who had lived through the massacre. Counseling services were provided to the survivors and their families, but the road to recovery was long and arduous. The community of Realengo came together to support one another, organizing fundraisers to cover medical expenses and hosting memorial events to honor the victims. In the aftermath of the tragedy, a permanent memorial was erected at Tasso da Silveira Municipal School. A quiet garden now occupies the space where the massacre unfolded, featuring a plaque engraved with the names of the 12 children who lost their lives. Each name is accompanied by a short description, capturing the hopes and dreams that were stolen from them. For the families, the memorial serves as a place of reflection and remembrance. Parents visit regularly, leaving flowers and letters for their lost children. The garden has also become a symbol of resilience, reminding visitors of the importance of cherishing life and fostering compassion. The Realengo massacre drew international attention, with comparisons made to other school shootings around the world. Analysts noted parallels between Wellington's actions and those of other perpetrators, such as the Columbine shooters, whom he idolized. These comparisons underscored the global nature of the issue, prompting discussions about the factors that drive individuals to commit such atrocities. Brazil's tragedy became a case study in how societal issues such as mental health, bullying, and access to firearms intersect to create the conditions for mass violence. Governments around the world took note, with some adopting measures aimed at preventing similar incidents in their own countries. One of the most poignant figures in the aftermath of the massacre was Wellington's adoptive sister, who spoke publicly about her family's grief and shock. She described Wellington as a quiet, intelligent boy who had struggled to fit in but had never exhibited signs of violence during his youth. Her anguish was palpable as she recounted the loss of her mother, Davina, and how it had affected Wellington. She expressed regret that she had not recognized the extent of his suffering, blaming herself for failing to intervene. Her words resonated with many, highlighting the importance of addressing mental health issues before they escalate into tragedy. A decade later, the scars of the Realengo massacre remain visible in the community. Survivors have grown into adulthood, carrying the weight of their experiences with them. Some have channeled their pain into advocacy, working to raise awareness about mental health and gun violence. Others have chosen to move forward quietly, seeking peace in their own way. The massacre also left an indelible mark on Brazil's education system. Schools across the country implemented stricter security measures, including surveillance cameras, security personnel, and emergency drills. While these changes have helped to improve safety, they have also served as a constant reminder of the day when innocence was shattered in Realengo. The story of Wellington Menezes de Oliveira is a chilling reminder of the consequences of neglecting mental health and social well-being. It highlights the dangers of isolation and the devastating impact of untreated psychological issues. While it is impossible to undo the events of April 7, 2011, the lessons learned from the tragedy continue to shape Brazil's approach to mental health and public safety. By addressing the root causes of violence and fostering a culture of compassion, society can work to prevent similar tragedies in the future. The Realengo massacre remains one of the darkest days in Brazil's history, a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating consequences of unchecked violence. Wellington Menezes de Oliveira's name will forever be associated with an act of unimaginable cruelty, but the resilience of the survivors and the strength of the community offer a glimmer of hope in the face of darkness. As we remember the lives lost and the pain endured, we are reminded of the importance of vigilance, empathy, and the shared responsibility of protecting one another. The Realengo tragedy may have cast a long shadow, but it has also illuminated the path toward a more compassionate and understanding society.